Welcome to the 2024 Phish Studies Conference Video Archive. The Mockingbird Foundation is thrilled and proud to present this groundbreaking video series on our YouTube channel. It continues our tradition of celebrating music education. Since 1996, we have been an all-volunteer nonprofit organization dedicated to broadening access to educational opportunities for youth in music and the musical arts. Please visit mbird.org to donate today.
Well, okay, let's go. So Paul Jakus is the first speaker in this final contributed talk center. So go ahead, Paul, take it away.
All right, thank you for that introduction. All right, so I'm supposed to ask a question on behalf of Ellis. Ellis, who was in the last session, when I said, you know, I've had this interest in ratings, and when I'm talking to him about the ratings, he says, who uses these ratings anyway? So is there anybody who's ever been on Phish.net and looked at ratings for any reason whatsoever? Raise your hand. Okay, so a few folks. I'll inform Ellis of that because he's not here right now. All right. First, I want to say thank you to Mockingbird Foundation for the main time suck of my life known as Phish.net, to Adam Scheinberg, who sent me all the data that we're about to see here, and to Adam, Charlie, and Ellis for some discussions previously about the data. And, of course, all the content of this is mine, so if you have any complaints, it lies with me. One confession here. I'm an economist, and I am playing outside of my disciplinary sandbox. I'm relying upon information that I've read that's from, literature that I've read by information systems people and by marketing people, and then I've just applied some fairly simple statistics to it. So if you have that expertise, as Jason does, please feel free to weigh in. Okay, so at times it seems that the two most popular activities on Phish.net are rating shows and then complaining about those show ratings, and I'm not sure which one of those comes first. There are numerous biases that are asserted, all of which suggest that ratings should be viewed with suspicion at best and utterly dismissed at worst. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the individual level data that we have in here. If you have ever rated a show on Phish.net, you're going to show up in the data right here. I don't know that anybody else has looked at the data like this way, and we actually learned quite a bit. We're going to focus on establishing rater credibility, because I think that's a fairly simple way for Phish.net to move forward. So, first off, what is the problem here? And you can think of our show rating as our best guess, our best estimate at this unobservable construct called show quality. We're actually aiming at the center of the target here, and for a variety of reasons, we might miss that target. First of all is variance. We're relying upon a sample of users to provide their assessment of what show quality was. If we get a good sample of a good sample of folks providing ratings, we may or may not get a perfect sample that's 100% representative of Phish fans, and therefore, on the basis of the quirks of each sample, we're going to miss a little bit. We might not hit the center of the target. Sometimes, if we have low variance, it'll be close. If other times we might have a high level of variance, we're going to be, on average, we're going to be right around where that target is, but we're going to be missing high, low, left or right, something like that. Variance is simply going to be with us regardless of what we do because we're relying upon a sample. The other way we've got error is bias. That is systematically missing the center of the target. We want lower variance. We're stuck with it. Bias is the bigger problem. Now, there might be any zillions of reasons why we might have a biased sample. In Phish.net, the primary one, of course, is it's a self-selected sample of Phish fans who go on and rate them. If those people are not representative of fandom in general, we're going to be off. Are we going to be high? Well, probably not if it's a bunch of jaded vets getting on there. Are we going to be low? We really don't know. The other thing that could happen is malicious rating. People who are going on there and deliberately rating low, those are the so-called bombers, or deliberately rating high, even though that's not what they truly believe about the show, but they want to fluff the show to a higher rating for whatever reason that might be. Who knows what that motivation might be? I'm suspecting that on Phish.net, having spent the last couple, 3 months with these data, I think we're relatively high on both variance and bias. And I think the good thing is that there are some fairly straightforward ways in which we can at least bring those things down and establish a little bit more credibility for the raters themselves and actually then eventually for the ratings themselves. Okay, now, online consumer reviews are ubiquitous. That whole 5-star thing that we've got going, and that's actually something we have Ellis to thank for. Business professionals and academics have been looking at this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, there is a lot of money to be made in the study of this. There is money to be made if you can manipulate people into buying your product and keep them from buying your competitor's product. And there's a lot of money to be made if you can identify and remove fraudulent ratings. So there's an entire literature on this. The elaboration likelihood model is a 5-factor model that is the dominant theoretical approach to this, and the 5 factors are fairly simple. We have a reviewer or a messenger who writes a review, rates a product, provides a message. That message is then sent through a communications channel that is then received by a recipient, a reader, a listener, however they're taking in the information from the channel, and then they have a decision to make. Are they going to buy the product or not buy the product? Or in our particular case, are they going to listen to the show or not listen to the show? The ELM focuses on each aspect of this, and I want to focus on how people actually evaluate the review. The literature says there are 2 general approaches that people take, the hard way and the easy way. The central route, the one that requires the highest degree of elaboration, and that's where the name comes from, says you're looking for the reviews that are most persuasive and effective in your perception that will help you make a product decision. So you're looking at information quality, you're trying to figure out, is it complete, does it address all the attributes of the product, is there consistency among the various reviews that you read? This is time-consuming, it's more difficult, so then what people like to do is rely upon the quick and easy peripheral cues, the things that are easy to assess. You can quickly assess the length of review. You can scan it to see if they use extreme words, absolute best, it's the worst. Whether or not they focus only on one side, this is the best thing since sliced bread, blah, 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 and there are no negative product attributes at all. You can go ahead and look at that quickly. I'm going to focus on the fact that sometimes we can get information on reviewers in themselves, individual reviewers and their credibility. The other thing that people rely on as a quick and easy cue is an overall average product rating. So this is what we're aiming at right here. The key takeaways from this literature, and again, I am not an information systems or marketing person, but I looked for the highest cited literature that I could find, and these things have hundreds of citations. Basically, if it's easily available, people will use both the central and the peripheral routes to make a decision. Second, source credibility or reviewer credibility is very important. Basically, if they trust the sources, that means they can make the quick route. They can take the peripheral approach and just hit the super quick stuff, make a quick decision, off they go. The source credibility also matters most to people who know little about a product, but they are motivated to learn. These are our new fans, the noobs. And I use noob, I spell it this way because one of my favorite netters is Noob100, who's just great, and he provides the best reviews. So that's just a small little shout out to him. The other thing, and this is what's happened recently, I mean, we've heard complaints about these ratings forever. If, in fact, people begin to believe that some reviews and ratings are manipulated, they begin to suspect all of them. So there you go. That's what's going on. Okay, now, how is .NET structured? There are lots of different places you get the review information. You had the front page blog post on the day after the show. This thing shows up within 8 to 16 hours, but you don't necessarily know how the author rated this show. You actually don't know anything about the author because there's no link to anything else they may have done. Therefore, it's very difficult to assess their credibility. Lastly, this thing basically slides off the front page of Phish.net, and you can't search for it anymore. Okay. Another place to get it is what I'm calling the show detail page. You go to shows, Phish show, or Phish set list, then you click on the date, you get to the part that has not just a set list in the notes, it's got the show rating, it's got jam chart versions, it's got teases, the albums, and all that sort of stuff. So here what we've got is the average show rating and the number of people who rated it. The numeric rating is somewhat isolated from the reviews. Those actually appear lower here, so it's not bad. But who are the 583 people? Do we know anything about them? Well, we might know something about, in this particular case, this is July 3rd, 2011, third night Super Bowl. The show reviews appear as you scroll down that particular page. The show review with the greatest number of thumbs ups, or net thumbs up, is the one that appears highest. This is Big Flop Mop Top, got the score of 17 thumbs up. I still don't know what they rated in the show. I don't know if they've reviewed any other shows, and I don't know how good those reviews were. We don't know anything about this person other than they wrote a really nice review. And actually, when you read the review literature and you read this one, this matches up. There's a reason this is the top review. It does everything you're supposed to do. And then the other thing I want to do is say, from 2019 Phish Conference, Hannah Mieszkowski did a textual analysis of 5,000 show reviews and related them to reviewer ratings and show ratings. That's online if you want to go watch that. I have her paper. I've asked if I can get permission to share it if anybody's interested in that. Okay, another place you can get show ratings is over on the top-rated show page. You can get it for the entire history of Phish, or you can get it by year. Again, this is isolated from any reviews or reviewers. Now, the key thing that we've got here is we're taking all of our central root information and our peripheral cues, and we're making it very difficult for the .NET user to put that all together. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move away from reviews and ratings and just focus on ratings. And I'm going to say, can we identify anomalous reviewers, low credibility folks? There's a website called rateyourmusic.com. You can get on there and rate various hang on a second, I'm looking for it, your albums. As of a couple of weeks ago, there were 132 million ratings on this site of 6.1 million albums by 1.7 million artists. Just so you know, that's about 400 times the number of ratings that we have on Phish.net. This is big, okay? What do? You don't get just a weighting of one. Phish.net, they add up all of our ratings and divide by the number of people who do it. We all have a weight of one. They go ahead and say, I want to know something about you. I'm going to give you a different weight. Could be 0, could be 1, could be something in between, based on the number of ratings you've got, your deviation from the mean rating, how different are you from everybody else, whether or not you actually show some variation in your ratings, and do you come to this site reasonably often. They are deliberately opaque about how they use these things. I don't know what their tolerance levels are for any one of these things except for one metric, and that's one I actually use shortly. Now, as it turns out, there's another paper that I saw in Journal of Management Information Systems by Kumar et al. That essentially uses every single metric except for the login metric. They use the same metrics of Rate Your Music. These guys are crazy, though. They take 10 univariate measures, one multivariate measure, stick it into an ensemble model, you estimate the parameters of that model, and it kicks out the probability that you're an anomalous rater. It's totally cool. I couldn't even begin to program it. We need something more pragmatic. So what I'm going to do is start with trying to replicate the anomalous rating system, the Rate Your Music system. But first, let's go to the data. Basically, what I got is 343,000 observations. I got an anonymized user ID, so you're in the database, but I actually don't know who you are. I got your rating, I got your show date, and I know the date and time you submitted your rating. This turns out to be a phenomenally rich data set. I can actually get all of Kumar's univariate data, univariate measures out of these 4 variables alone. Basically, I've got this for all shows that you may have rated. This is what the distribution looks like now. This shouldn't surprise anybody. Actually, I put this up on Phish.net a few weeks ago. Hang on a second, let me come back over there. 90% of all ratings are between 3, 4, and 5. Very few 3s and 2s. 1s and 2s. So who do you think is the problem? The Fluffers or the Bombers? Okay, there you go. Okay, so now we're looking at this here. This is the smooth distribution of the current system of the show ratings. 806 or 40% of the shows in my database are rated 4 or higher. For perspective, the number 10 rated show, the distance from the number 10 rated show to the number 106th ranked show is 0.1 point. That's how concentrated they are, okay? There we go. So there's that. Now, here are some actual Phish.net users right here. Let's take a look at user A. I've selected these because they're representative of what we've got there in the sample. Rated 49 shows. Every last one of them was a 5. That's matched up with user B. Rated 35 shows. Every last one of them a 1. Okay. This actually, believe it or not, there are way more people with only 5s than people with only 1s. And you would guess that from the previous distribution. Users C and D are a little different. We've got at least a little bit of variation in their ratings. This guy, 50% of their ratings were a 3, 20% were a 4, 30% were a 5. I'm using those percentages for a reason. Those are going to be key to what we're going to see as far as a metric we're going to use to identify these folks. Okay, now, 3 measures. Number 1, number of shows rated. Actually, Rate Your Music tells me that you don't get full weight unless you rate at least 50 shows. So that's going to be one of my metrics there. I'm including equations simply because I want to include equations, but what we're doing is measuring average deviation from a mean. This is very simple. You have a rating, you rate a show 3, the mean is 4.4, you're a negative 1.4 deviance, take an absolute value, so that becomes 1.4. I add that up I do it for every one of your shows, and then I divide by that and take the average. It's your average deviance from everybody else. Okay? If it's a low rating, that means you're kind of saying. If you're super high, that means you've deviated a lot. Okay? And then finally, this measure called entropy. And entropy, these are those proportions. When I said 50%, 20%, 30%, that's what these things are down here. Entropy comes from information science. It is the average expected value of information. We're going to go back over here, back to these guys now. What do you think, when user A gets back online, what do you think they're going to rate the next show? Right? They're going to give it a 5. When user B comes on, we know they're going to rate it a 1. They're 100% predictable. Okay? When you go through that calculation, the value of their entropy is 0, which basically says they have 0 expected value of information. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're deliberately putting in a high or a low rating. I don't have to worry about whether or not they are sincere, which is a discussion that Alice and I have had. This is the cold logic of information science. I kind of like that. It makes my job a heck of a lot easier. These other guys, we've got positive value of information here. Okay, the weights, I arbitrarily selected cutoff values for the number of reviews. I used 50, which was actually reported in Rate Your Music. I said 5 for the minimum. I said if you're in the top 2.5% of the distribution for deviation, I'm going to treat you as perhaps not a credible reviewer. That's the top 411 people in the size of our rating. And then if you've got a 0 entropy or a low entropy, the key thing here is that you can see that under the my modified rate your music thing, I have 10,000 people who have a 0 weight, and I only have 1,400 people with full weight. This is a pretty harsh system. So what I do is I relax these constraints to come closer and closer to the current system. So that's what we're seeing across here. This basically eliminates any restrictions associated with the number of readings that you may have provided. These are the two I'm going to talk about right here, so I'm just going to move on here. This is what it looks like. This is the smooth distribution of average show ratings when I've got modified RYM, which is the red, and then the green, which is alternative 1. You see we eliminate that bimodal thing. We throw a little bit more of the mass of this distribution to the left. Most of it goes to the right. Mean rating actually goes up when we wait. Okay, what does this do to show ranking? This is the top 21 shows right here. What we can see here is that a few of the shows, 4 of the top 10, stay in the top 10 regardless of the ranking system. Others take rather large tumbles, including my beloved Ruby Waves Alpine Valley, goes from 21 to 122. December 30th, 1999 is another one that takes a huge tumble when you start doing these weights. Okay, what's going on here is, remember that how concentrated the ratings were at that upper end of the distribution? We didn't fix that. That didn't change at all. 0.1 points is still a lot of shows in there. So what are we going to do? Which rating system is best? So what I've done is tried to do a convergent validity test. Essentially, I've gone to try and find some external measures that I know should be correlated with show rating. As we have more jamming in a show, I should see that show rating go up. As my number and type of, I call this one a pace segue because it's just one song ending, the next one beginning. This is sort of a flow segue. Those are those really cool segues that we love that flows from one song to the other. As those increase, I expect a higher score. As they pull out rarities, I expect a higher score, et cetera, et cetera. I have 14 of these. 10 out of 14 are positive and highly statistically significant. 3 are positive and barely missing significance, and 1 is negative and insignificant. I think this basically says that we actually have good convergent validity, and the amazing thing is it's not just for the weighted ones, it's also for the original current one. So Ellis and I are in agreement that actually the current, you can use the ratings as they are now to help guide your listening choices. So that's kind of a nice positive thing, but we can do better. And so to check this out, I've actually gone to some more summary measures here. The modified one is, for an F statistic, is roughly about 40% better than the current. And then alternative 1 is just a little bit behind that. Same for the adjusted R-square. They're much higher for the weighted. They lose a little bit on its predictive ability. That's such a small thing that I actually would advocate that doing the weighting and doing that in such a way that I think can be sold to users of Phish.net, to tell them that we are watching out and making sure that we are finding people who are helping us predict show rating as opposed to those who may not be helping us so much. So I think Phish.net raters are viewed with suspicion. I think there's a couple of ways that we may approach to fix that. So I think weighting those things will help improve the receptibility, make people more receptive to using the ratings for their intended purpose. The other thing I think we ought to do is head back over here and put some reviewer stats in with the show reviews. Phish.net has all the data. It's an amazing data source. I know that this guy rated 27, I presume it's a guy, it's Phish.net, 26 reviews, oh, come on, give me a break. You know it's true. With an average score of 3.3, I would love to get the show rating like there, and I would actually love to get the average show rating for this person as well. Anyway, that's what I've got here. I think there are ways that we can sort of get the rating back to a level of confidence in the community that they can use this thing as a guide to their listening choices. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes for questions, so there are microphones on either end if you want to walk down.
Thank you for letting me go.
Awesome, Paul. So good. And as someone that's a big .NET setlist spaz, thank you. Just thank you to Ellis and everybody behind .NET.
High-fiving you from here.
That's me too. It doesn't get said enough. The weighting the raters thing I think is really interesting. Is there any possibility of leveraging individual biographical data, or you look at some of the, so I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. So if somebody's going to leave a review on a show from '94 and they didn't see a show until 2010, I may not trust their rating. And so is there a way to pull in not just the amount of ratings they've done or their scoring, but first shows some of that biographical data that we can put in our bio section, our profile section?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is, say, if people have put in the shows that they've attended, use that as a measure of the rater credibility. You could do that, and you'll see that on product websites when it says verified buyer or something like that. So did they attend the show or not with this particular rating? Of course, people assert that there's a bias associated with that. The other thing that we've got, we know who's friends with who. So you could link this many, many different ways. We know who have had, I don't know this, so I won't say that. But we know who's replied to who in threads online. So we could look at connections between people that way as well. I was going to say, never mind, I won't say it. Do we know who private messages who? That's why I wasn't going to say it.
Thanks. This is really, really fun. And I do have a more numbery question that we can take offline. One thing that I've noticed and has been a gripe of mine for a long time with these ratings is, particularly as years go by, the across year, so the within year ratings of like, I want to find the best show of 2022. I feel like I can get a pretty good gauge on that based on the current system. It's the across year. I want to look at whether or not, on average, 2022 was better than 2019, which, and those are the sorts of things where I'm having trouble with this. So do you think a modified rating system, using those relaxed assumptions gets us closer to something like that?
I don't know. So one of the things that rateyourmusic.com is, if you haven't been on there in a while, you get bounced. So when we do have people, what are there, 87,000 registered users, and how many are actually active in any given year? If they haven't been on in 5 years, and you can see that in the data, because we have the timestamp. When was the last time that they were here? You could certainly investigate that. I wonder. My first thought would be trying to present a normalized rating. So that would be as opposed to the raw number. I don't think the raw number means very much, except within the context of maybe a tour, something like that. Yes. Moving beyond that, the all-time list, no, who knows? Yeah. Thanks. Okay.
Very quickly, I just want to note that Big Flop Mop Top is indeed Dave Iannucci. If you click on his name, it shows you that and goes you to his webpage.
Oh, okay.
So it is a guy.
I did. I love the odds.
And I did want to mention, there was someone else that had looked at stats and Phish.net and used analysis to do predictions based on previous rankings of looking at a set list of a show, what the next day the ranking would be for that show. Was that you? There was another, it was one of these conferences. It was that someone had done that research. So there was somebody that did look at this analysis.
I have a model that's in the book from the last conference that should be coming out sometime that tries to look at show attributes and predict the show rating. It may have been me, but I wouldn't characterize that research that way.
Were you at Gorge 2018?
I was indeed at Gorge 2018.
Okay.
That might have been me.
That might have been you. All right.
Thank you. Excuse me.
So our next speaker is Jason Zietz.
You got it. Sorry, most people don't. So
Jason's an assistant teaching professor at the University of Colorado Boulder, and he teaches topics such as programming, cognitive science, and user-centered design. So please welcome Jason.
thanks, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Give me a moment while I get my talk up here. Oh, there it is. All right, okay, hold on. Pull over here. And probably get it. No, hold on one second. Oh, okay, there we go. All right. Oh, it's flipped. Hold on. You'd figure I did this for a living or something, right?
I use these.
Hold on.
Can I tell you what the tech person told me?
What did the tech person tell you? Because this is, I had this working before. Hold on, wait.
Hit Windows P.
Windows P.
And then do extend, and then you
I
have.
thought I just did that. All right, it's just getting the one that's the right screen. Yay! Thank you. You're actually in my slides. So you asked the question. I don't want to spoil it. So you asked a question yesterday about cover songs, right? Did you ask yesterday during the business? Anyway, we'll get to it. So you might be in my slides, as it turns out. Excuse me. So thanks for Stephanie, everybody, putting the conference together. Thanks to Phish.net for having some wonderful data. No thanks to Spotify because they made my life difficult. I am here to talk about, this is my talk, who does Phish play for? Themselves, the fans, a little from column A, a little from column B. Any good academic talk has a secondary title, right? So I threw this in here. This is an exploration of setlist streaming and show review data. This is Hampton in the early 2000s. I didn't have tickets on the last night of the show, so I sat outside and I took pictures outside the spaceship. Anyway, so my background is I have a PhD in computer science, cognitive science, and neuroscience. I tend to look at problems from a human-centered perspective holistically. So I look at like the person, and they're typically involved with some sort of computational tool. I think about the biological aspects of their decision-making, that sort of thing, along with their environment and everything that kind of goes into it. This is a little bit different than that. It's largely, well, pretty much all Phish statistics, what we can see about what's going on with set lists and how people, who the band might be playing with. I'm really, really excited to be here to present this talk because it means that I'll stop tinkering with my slides because I just do that constantly. There's finally an end. It can stop and I can get on with my life. So spoiler alert, this is the answer, right? And you know, gotta have a good Simpsons reference. It wasn't necessarily always like this, but when we look at some stats, we'll see that that's kind of what we see. I should also you're at a talk about data and Phish, so you know what you're getting into. If you've never seen Revenge of the Nerds, please go watch it. Anyway, it's a pretty nerdy talk. So who does Phish play for, and how do we figure this out? One of a topic that I teach is around exploratory data analysis. We ask questions and we try to figure out some answer, some interesting question, something that we find interesting, and we need to explore it with data. And so how do we figure this out? Who does Phish play for? We answer this with data. We get some data and we try to dig the answers out of what we've got. And they may not be perfect answers, but they're answers that will shed some light on our question. So we have to ask what kind of data do we look to answer this question? Not this data, although he's a fan. I'm a big fan of that data. The data that we look at is there are two things that when I was asking this question to myself, how can we answer this, is we can see what kind of songs does Phish seem to like to play the most at their shows, and then what kind of songs and what songs exactly do fans like to hear the most. And then, so if a show has more songs that Phish seems to like to play, then they're playing for themselves, and this is the hypothesis. And if a set list has more songs that the fans seem to listen to more, then it would seem that the band would be playing for the fans. And so the data that we're going to look at is going to address these two questions. As far as what songs do Phish like to play the most, look at their set list. This is how we look at their set list. We figure out what songs they're playing the most. This is the very sort of basic kind of simple jump into this data. At the end, I'll talk about how we can improve this analysis. But really, at its core, you can just say, well, look, if there's a band that plays live as much as Phish does, the songs they're playing the most are the ones they like the most, right? Unless three of them are trolling the fourth person, right? And they're making life. That's not what they're doing, right? They're playing music that they enjoy. As far as songs that the fans like the most, it's whatever they listen to the most. Now, how do we figure out what they listen to the most? This is a little bit trickier because there's a lot of ways that people listen to their music now, and we may not know everything that everybody's listening to, but with any kind of data analysis, we do the best we can with the data that we have. And the idea is, again, I'm thinking that fans may like shows the most when they hear songs they like the most, right? Like, if you're not a fan of Contact and you hear that, you may not like that show as much, even though it's one song, but, So, it was the first Phish song I had ever heard, and when I first heard it, I did not like it. Didn't make any sense. I grew up on, like, Van Halen and Joe Satriani, and I was like, what is this? Anyway, and now I'm giving this talk. It's an amazing trajectory, right? So then, who would have known, So then we take all of this data and we apply this data, like I said, to set lists, and we try to see, okay, who liked this show, who was this show for more? Then we look at this through all the shows that Phish has ever played. So what Phish likes. So this set list data comes from Phish.net with their publicly available API. Every song that Phish has ever played at you probably all know this, every song they've ever played at a show is in this API, and it's got an entry. And so with this data, we can total up, like, how many times they played You Enjoy Myself. Anybody know? 600 and something, all right, 635 or so. I've only been looking at this data every day for like 4 weeks. So we're only looking at the public shows. There are a number of shows that are in the API that were like either shows that when they played a set at like a late night show or something, or there was a private show, like I guess Jim Carrey, when they shot me, myself, and Irene up in Vermont. Everybody came to they played like that. That set list doesn't count in here. Although that would be interesting because you'd figure then those set lists, they're absolutely playing for themselves, you would think. Anyway, so that's that. I forgot to mention, if I teach, so I'm used to people interrupting and asking questions. So if you have any clarification questions, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer any more kind of conceptual. We can probably save till the end. So every track of every show, everything that's been played has an entry in the API. There are 37,462 songs, when I checked last, that have been played across all the shows, all official shows. Now, they're just Phish as the band, not like solo shows, not, no like sit-ins, that sort of stuff. That's not in here. It's just Phish proper shows, right? Okay, so this is a cumulative sum play count chart. And there's a lot of interesting stuff here. 37,462 shows have been played, or songs have been played at shows, but only 952 of those songs are unique. So those 952 songs have been played, some have been played far more than others. Of those 952 songs that the band has played, how many songs have only been played once? 355, which is, so the green line, so the green dash line shows you that's the point at which songs have only been played one time. And so the blue line here is what's called the cumulative summation. So this is the total number of plays for each song, where the song at the beginning is the rank. So You Enjoy Myself has been played the most, 635 times. That starts first. And so every song after that, the number of times it's been played gets added to that blue line, and we get this long tail kind of behavior. And you may have seen this idea, this long tail, where in things like, it was very popular many years ago, people talking about the successes of companies like Amazon and Netflix back when they have DVDs, if you still remember that, where they had a huge inventory of things because that huge inventory paid dividends, right? Amazon, you could buy anything there, and they have a lot of a certain amount of product, but then they have a little of a whole bunch of things. And so you get this long tail kind of behavior. The yellow line is around 15% of the unique songs. And that accounts for about 80% of the total number of songs that have been played at Phish shows, 29,942 tracks, right, out of those 37,000. So you only have 15% of the unique songs that are taking a large 80% of the songs that are played at these shows. And so we say, like, those are probably the songs that the band really, really likes, right? So that's that. These are a list of the songs that have been played most. So the top 25, you can see you've got You Enjoy Myself, 635, Possum, 569. Hold Your Head Up comes in at 537. Why? Comes up twice. I give this lecture to my students, they'd be asleep by now. But they're on their phones. You all, captive audience, right? You know how this works. Now, you might say that, like, well, Hold Your Head Up, they go in and then they go into something else and then they come back into it, and sometimes they do it 3 times. That's happened. I don't know. Let's see if you can see who can out-nerd the other person, right? So anyway, but it shows up, it'll come up as multiple counts. Now, whether you think this is fair or not, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. That's my son, Oliver. I have stickers in case anybody wants Oliver shrugging stickers. I've got, come see me. Anyway. That's an easy sort of fit. We can come back to whether or not, I don't know how much it's really sort of affecting, the grand scheme of things. I mean, but you can make an argument, and it's not, you might make an argument that for Hold Your Head Up, it's like, well, that should only be counted once, but something like Moby Dick, which was played 6 times, what was that, July 11th in 2000, right? That gets counted 6 separate times. So that will affect the play counts here. You Enjoy Myself has been played twice, I think, 25 shows or something like that. So what I did with these numbers was just do a simple proportion to get a score for every song, right? So every song, so 635 has been played 635 times. There have been 37,000 number of songs. We divide 635 by the total number of songs, multiply by 100 because I don't like tiny little numbers. And so you get like a score for every song. And so when if you had a set list that had the top 5 songs in it, right, that would have a very high band score. Okay, so you add up each for each. So for each set list, you take the score for each song and just add them all up. This is my aside about cover songs. So someone yesterday asked a question about have covers during the loss. That was you, right. So thanks, by the way, because this was my rabbit hole for like over an hour. You hear a question, you want to troll a buddy of yours who's really into data. You ask some innocuous sort of question about data and Phish, right? Like, hey, how many songs with a single word in the title have Phish played on a Saturday? Like, there goes. See you later, weekend. Anyway, so this question comes up yesterday. I'm like, I have an answer for this, right? So sometime later, they're actually playing more cover songs now. That's the green, right? Than they were before, roughly over 5 on average, compared to like almost 5 in the 1.0 and 3.7, almost 4. So thank you for that. Anyway, so yeah, you troll your friends, troll your data friends. Just be real innocuous about it. Anyway, okay, so that's the band score. So now we're going to talk about where the fan score comes from. And Spotify also has an API, and they have a lot of cool, there's a lot of cool information about songs in Spotify. The thing that they don't give you are the play counts, which is, the thing that I actually need to give this talk. And so in order to get that information, you have to do this sort of very dirty thing that programmers sometimes do, which we call scraping data from a web page. And those of you who've done this before are nodding and probably feeling dirty right now. It's not a lot of fun, but it's the way to get the data. And so basically you mimic a web browser, and I pull the page up. This is for every single song that's on Spotify, which is 2,000, it's just under, it's 2,800 or something like that. 93 albums they've got, Phish has on Spotify, and you grab that play count for every single one. So yeah, it's that's how to get that kind of data. There's other data that you can get from the Spotify API that maybe we'll talk about briefly. The limitations on Spotify, there are a couple. So first of all, you don't know who's streaming the data, right? And I think that when it could be the person who just found out about Phish through Taylor Swift, right? And so now they're checking out Phish. It could be the family of Wookiees, right, that are into the band and really the hardcores. We don't actually know who's listening to the music. It doesn't really, I would argue that it doesn't really matter because there's no way you're getting that data. Well, I mean, you could, but it's a totally different can of worms. We can get into I'll get into sort of the limitations around where this data is coming from. But this is your farm. This is your Spotify data. And so the clean song name, I call it clean song because Spotify has multiple albums of Phish that are up, right, that have a whole bunch of live tracks. And so you have multiple versions of a song. I clean the name of the song up so they're all the same when it comes to data analysis. So one version of Farmhouse gets counted the same way as another version of Farmhouse. One version of Bouncing Around the Room gets the same, counted as the same, 7 different versions, whatever. They're all the same when we total them up. Farmhouse, by and large, crushes everyone else with over 25 million plays. I don't know why. No, it's a fine song. There's nothing wrong with Farmhouse. It probably is. It probably is. And this is a complete separate topic, right? That I do want to rabbit hole, but I don't because I don't have time. I checked out the stats on when certain songs hit certain number of playlists, and there's this huge jump of when Farmhouse started hitting a bunch of playlists, and that really tweaked these results. But you can see kind of the stuff that's up there. The Spotify song score is done the same way as the band song score, the number of plays divided by the total number, the number of streams divided by the total number of streams multiplied by 100, and you get 5 something for Farmhouse and on down. The cumulative sum column is the same thing that I did with the other one. With the other one, I don't have the plot for it because it looks very much the same, where you have a small amount of songs. The top 25 songs streaming on Spotify count for almost 40% of the streams there's thousands, right? So they count for a whole lot, right? So you end up getting that. I forgot to mention this where you get a small number accounting for a large number. You've probably heard this 80-20 rule, Pareto principle. You get a similar sort of thing where you get 15-20% counting for 75 to 80% of the streams. Anyway, so you can see that where the streams are coming from here. I also wanted this first performance column up here. I wanted to put that up there because we're going to get to this plot in a second where this is going to become a factor. And so just keep it in mind about when these songs were released. By and large, there are all these older pre-2000 songs. Almost all of them are pre. There are a handful that aren't, but they're pretty much all pre-2000 songs. Anyway, all right. So, who is Phish playing for? I talked about this. So, we take the band scores and add them up, the fan songs and add them up. I know you all are on the edge of your seat. You just can't wait to see this data. You hurry up and get to the data, right? Get to the plot. I get it. Trust me. So, I added these up, right? And then I took a difference between the two, the band score minus the fan score. So, if we have a negative, and we call this score difference, we have a negative value of that, where the band is playing for themselves. If we have a positive version, they're playing for the fans. And so we get this beautiful plot here. So, yeah, right? I can throw whatever I want. It's like lines and, hey, that's awesome. There's meaning behind this, right? So every show is a circle on here, going back from the beginning to current day. I grouped things in eras, 1, 2, and 3. I didn't include 4, not because I care, because I wanted to troll you all who really care about this. I don't know. It actually makes it easier to visualize the data to actually categorize them, right, into show errors, because because of the gaps that are in between the different errors. And then I plotted what's called a rolling average, where this one is a 30-day rolling average, or 30 show rolling average, basically. You often see the rolling average done in stock market and that sort of thing because it smooths out a bunch of the noise, right? Because if I did a line between each one of these circles, it'd be really difficult to look at. So we smooth this out by doing this rolling average, and you see this kind of pattern where early on they were playing songs for themselves, and then it ticks up quite a bit, right? And then we get sort of more of a central kind of, this is staying right around 0. So there's a balance between the songs that they're playing more band-oriented versus fan-oriented. All right. And this is why I showed on the previous plot about when the songs came out, why I thought it was important, because it's not like people are streaming only new songs, right? And then that would account for why there's this negative, score diff early in their career. They're actually, when that tick comes up, I think that's probably when a lot of those songs that are getting streamed, that's that tick up. Anyway, so I think that's something important to keep in mind. You might also be thinking, well, what about the shows? Maybe there are a bunch of shows early on where those songs aren't available on Spotify. On average, the number of songs that aren't available, that weren't available during that, that weren't being played during that time, it's really low, actually, in 1.0. It's less than 2. So basically, there's only 2 songs on average per show that aren't available on Spotify to stream, and those numbers actually go up a little bit, in the modern era. So it's not that. I think it's just people just really like the songs from the 90s because they're smart. All right. Anyway. I can't help it. I do this to my students. I just mess with people. Anyway. All right, I wanted to throw another piece of another bit of information in here, which is show review data. So as Paul was talking about, he was talking about the ratings of shows. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sentiment analysis of show reviews. And this is where you look at the actual words that are used in the reviews and determine if something is positive or negative, has a positive slant or a negative slant, right? Something positive, I love this show, it was great, I lost my mind, whatever, blah, 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 right? This is the word, that's a positive sentiment. This is the worst show I've ever been to. The guy next to me threw up all over my legs and it was the worst night ever. That's a negative sentiment sort of thing. Neither of those things happened to me. So this takes all of the show reviews that are up on Phish.net. So yeah, sorry if I've been crushing your servers lately. Download everything. And anyway, so I did this analysis. I don't want to get too much into the weeds about what analysis package I used, but I did a similar sort of thing where I took this. So the orange, so the color, those are the running totals, right? The moving averages are the same. The circles now are the sentiment score, and so the sentiment score goes from -1 to 1, right? So 1 is where it's completely the most positive experience, text that you can have, and negative is the most negative you can have. And so you can see there is this trend, the squishing trend, right? That you get a much more variable kind of reviews happening, the sentiment of the reviews in the 1.0 kind of era, and those start to squish as you get more modern. And interestingly, I won't say causally, but interestingly, that score diff comes closer and closer to 0 as these sentiment scores come move away from being negative and become more positive on average. So I would say that, and there's a lot, I think that there's a lot we can talk about sort of what more we can do with this. And I think that I would start with the fact that this is just Spotify data. Apple Music's API, you have to pay to access it. And so and I'm still waiting on my access. Phish In, that's a website, right, that you probably you can stream live shows, and right now they don't have a way to actually look at the counts, the streams of that, because that would be really interesting to see, what people are listening to. Weights in addition to play counts, I mean, I think that we can start weighting some metrics about songs. There's got to be some way to capture, because there's likely some way to capture, like, the shows that people like. We can tie this into the sentiment analysis before. It's not just about the songs that they play, right? Because they could pick your favorite songs, all, top to bottom, and then play them terribly, right? They play them in such a way that you don't love so much, or maybe you just really like the jams, whatever it is, and you're gonna that's gonna affect your what you think about a show. The other issue that we have, and I should mention, well, it's more of a another issue that we have is that, and this I think comes out in what Paul was presenting, is that some people just go to shows and love everything that they see, right? And you don't get this sort of balanced kind of estimation of, like, was this good or bad? It's like, it was Phish, right? I just loved it. I loved every moment. It was better than Cats. And that's sort of, some people are old enough to remember that joke. Anyway, I'll get on with it. All right. So these are all things we got to keep in mind. The other thing is sort of like things that we can weigh in addition to just straight numbers. We can put weights on these things. This gappiness of tracks played live. In '99 and 2000, when they played Meat Stick like every other show or every show, right? Like, the band clearly loved that song and wanted to play it, right? It wasn't like they were getting, it wasn't like Destiny Unbound requests. Like, no, they were just playing it because they loved it. And then those should be weighted a little differently, right? Because it was clear how much the band liked that. But that introduces an interesting sort of metric here, because the value of a show, the score of a show, changes over time, at least with respect to the band. Excuse me. The streams over time thing, this is something that you can't really get at if you're, unless you run a company that does this, where you're tracking when streams are happening, because those Farmhouse streams, maybe they all happened like 10 years ago or whatever, and they're not as many anymore, and so we could change those kind of weights based on that. The age and track availability, I think that's another thing that's really important to keep in mind of, how long things have been around, because that's going to affect the longer a track has been available on Spotify, that's going to affect, how many streams it gets. So that's all kind of in future work. Thank you very much to everybody. I really appreciate it. I will happily take or dodge questions.
Is this on? Yes. Real quick, how do you deal with or account for the fact that when Phish chooses to play a song, I think there's a complex mix of factors that inform that. Set list construction is a whole thing, like choosing to follow it with this, or like, this is a fan favorite, so let's play it, right? I don't know that it's as clear, and I know you know this. I don't know that every song they play is like, this is exactly what I want to play right now. There's a complex mix of factors that go into, let's play this right now.
Sure. I think the interesting sort of takeaway from this, I think, is more of the last little bit around the sentiment analysis of getting, like, what makes somebody love a show, right? Like, what this first part about who is Phish playing for. I mean, when you watch the interviews with Trey talking about, like, I have a set list in my head and then I tear it up and I walk out on stage and then I feel what everybody is playing. Like, he's not doing this, right? And I don't have any sort of, that would be awesome. That would be a good job, right? Like, Jason, run your algorithm and what should we open with? And that would be sweet. No, they're getting up and they're playing what they feel, right? But I think that the tail end of that, I think we can start kind of there's work on, like, predicting based on what's coming to set list, what is the next song going to be, that kind of thing, and that's just the statistical kind of thing. But I think that the interesting thing is looking at this data and saying, do people like shows more when they're hearing stuff that they like? Do they like shows more when, like, are there certain qualities and aspects of a show? I think that's the stuff that really that is interesting. And so that can be really helpful for, a website like Phish.net that says, like, someone says, like, I don't know what I should listen to. And then you say, like, I like these different attributes. And they're like, you would really like this show, that sort of thing. That's where I think this can really benefit. Thank you for the question.
Hi, thanks. This is really fascinating. Two sort of observations, questions on this. One is, I think I would be really curious to see how many people on Spotify, the only Phish song that they have in their listen history is Farmhouse.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe they've also liked No Woman, No Cry, or whatever it is that has somehow enabled it to come into their playlist or their algorithm,
Right.
and has then been like, oh, I like this song, I'm going to listen to it again and again and again, or something like that.
Right.
So that's just sort of a thought. I don't know if there's anything to do with that, but yeah. And then the other thought I was having was about bouncing around the room. So. I don't know that Bounce Around the Room is necessarily a song that Phish likes to play more than other songs, so much as it was a reliable 3-minute fun song that they could play in it's been around since 1989, right? So that song has been played way more than other songs just because they only had a certain number of songs at a certain point, right?
Yeah, and it's a great point, and I would, both of them, and let me take the second one first, and I would say that's an instance of the band playing for the fans, right? That, like, if this is not a song that they necessarily love, like, you can do that too, right? You can have a song that balances out around that 0 point of, like, where the value is roughly the same, and win-win, right? The band is happy, they're making the fans happy, and the fans are happy because they're hearing a tune that they like. As far as the algorithm goes, well, I don't know. I mean, like, we're stuck with it, and any kind of solution that we've tried to come up with to try to push the algorithm down, the companies push it right back in our faces because that's what gets clicks. So
I wonder if, like, related to Paul's idea of filtering out the people who only rate shows 5 or only rate shows 1, it's like the people who only have one Phish song in their library. Not the hardcores up here. And this is right. And so this is for sure. Like, this is something that, like, identifying users and who we can trust more, I think is an important would be a useful sort of thing. The ability to actually do that might be very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Quick question. So,
you want to set up?
Yeah, quick question for you. So I'm wondering if setlist position plays a part of it, because I had a very surreal experience where I was writing a set. I had the authority to help influence setlist for a thing called Fairly Well, and Trey did not. So he came to me to try to advocate for a change that he wanted. And in it, he said, I know a thing or two about writing set lists. And I bit my tongue about any number line thing. But that being said, he said that, I said, let me guess, when you write set list for your band, you have set list position in mind. And he said 7. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I have 7 songs for every position. Right? So he said, because he was arguing about an opener. And he said, you don't put your biggest your biggest song that everybody wants to hear as the opener, because there's going to be people in the parking lot. And he was concerned because he knew that his friends, when they played trucking, were still going to be in the parking lot or finding their seats. So he said, you have set list position. So in that case, filtered through your talk, I'm wondering, like, how, the opener would be for the fans, right? Or is the opener for the band because it's a song like Runaway Jim that you don't really want, it's like a warm-up, but at the same time you want everybody to be in. So I'm wondering where setlist position would come in from a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Just in the weights is what I would do. I don't want to take up any more time, but yeah, it would just be a weighting, I think, on sort of the positioning, that sort of thing.
Okay, so the final speaker of the conference is Matthew Sottile. Matt is Matthew. Can I call you Matt?
Yeah, Matt's fine.
Okay. He's a computer programmer. He lives in Portland, and he studies problems in software correctness, data analytics, and scientific computing. Welcome, Matt.
Cool. Thanks. So yeah, he was right. If you give people like me a benign-sounding question, you will destroy our weekends. At one point, somebody on Reddit asked a question that was, how many shows do I have to listen to? What's the minimum number of shows to cover the entire repertoire? And I realized that actually turns into some very interesting computer science problems and did destroy a weekend. But I solved it. Yeah, so where this comes from is this was, again, a question to answer for myself. What can I find from kind of mining through the history of Phish from kind of a data perspective where the music is the data? Specifically, what comes from downloading everything that you can possibly get of theirs and mining through it. When I realized I had 179 days worth of music, if I turned it on, it would take half a year to play. I realized it was hard to find stuff in it. So I was like, how can I make some sense out of this giant pile that I've created? So there's a few different ways that we can quantitatively analyze music. In my 2019 talk, I kind of looked at the extrinsic properties of, it's not about the music itself, it's about kind of the place the music appears. And set lists, ratings, reviews, that tends to be in that space. What I'm going to focus on here is what you can derive from the music itself. And I split it into two categories. There's the timing information that you can extract. And then there's, when you get into the audio content itself, you can start pulling even more out. This kind of goes in order of complexity of programming in order to write the tools to do this. To bound this potentially unbounded space, I was like, okay, I want to pick one song. This will be my focal point for the day. And so the choice I made was I'm going to look at Reba. The primary reason for this is I have a very large number of instances of this spanning most of the career. So about 35 years worth of performances. I have 364 distinct ones. Turns out somehow I'm missing 40 or so, and it's kind of been driving me crazy since I discovered that. Now, I know some of those tapes are not in circulation, but I know some are. And the other thing that's appealing from an analytical point of view is it has a predictable structure. You hear Reba start, you know you have about 6 minutes and 15 seconds until the composed section ends. You hit the jam, and then who knows where it's going to go from there. So from an analytical point of view, that's useful because I have ground truth. I have something that I know I can key off of, and I also know something on either side of that about what to expect inside the audio data. So where do I go in from here? So what I did to start was just looking at kind of the timing. Because I need these key points, I needed to find them. So I sat down with a pair of headphones, because it turns out not everybody in my house wanted to hear 364 versions of the transition and listening to me try and find it. When I started this, I thought, 364, that's not going to be too bad at all. So what I did is I had to find a few key points. The first one was the easy one, which is find the composed jam transition point. Because it's so regular, it turns out it's kind of a fun little game to play. And after a while, I could just hear one hit of the drum and know that I was off by 5 seconds and then find it. So I found all the points where it transitioned. I also noticed that because I was working largely off of tape recordings, not soundboard recordings, you didn't always know where the track started. So sometimes the track would start, and then you'd have some just audience noise. Maybe you had an audience chest move that was being announced. And so that's not when the song started. That's when the track started. So I wanted to go then into the track to figure out where the music started. And then I also had to filter out some data that I couldn't use because of either tape cuts or the track just starting late. I didn't tag everything. So the end of the song is actually much harder to nail down timing for. And honestly, I ran out of patience. I would love to go back and do it, but I don't have anything about the jam and ending transition nor the presence of whistling. So I'm going to look at two parts, time and the audio data itself. So looking at the temporal structure of the music, interesting patterns begin to emerge. So looking just at the total duration, where I've adjusted for the track starts. This is Trey starts playing to the end of the song. You do notice that there's kind of a distribution in how the song evolves over time. So early on in Reba's life, it was longer and then kind of settled down into a regular pace. So originally it was around 14, 13 minutes. And then for a while it was around 10 or 11 minutes. And then in the mid-90s, you had this kind of proliferation of jammy Rebas. So they got much longer, and it was much less predictable how long they would be. And then when we entered into the 3.0 period, we're in this kind of stable period. It gets jammy sometimes, but not as jammy as the mid-90s. And it's not nearly as variable. So interesting structure comes about when you look at the total duration. But if you use those tags that I put in, some more other interesting structure comes out. So if you look just at the composed section length of the song, this I thought was really cool. You see at the very beginning of time, they're very long. They're about 2 minutes longer than we get today. And I kind of tag that as the we're learning the song period. They're not the most pleasant to listen to. But it's interesting. Like you hear like kind of primordial Phish being born. And then it kind of settles into a regular pace. And then you get to the mid-90s. And these actually took me longer to classify because first off, they were playing the jam or the composed section faster. And at some points it was being played so fast that I actually had to go around in the song to make sure that the taper hadn't had the tape playing at the wrong speed. Because some of them do really sound almost jarringly fast. But then I realized it's basically they're just impatient. There's this period where they're like, we know we have to play this. We've played it hundreds of times at this point, and we want to get to the fun part. And then when you get to the 3.0 period, it's very stable. The only change that you see going on there is going from like a 6-minute 15 to a 6-minute 30 composed section. So I'd argue kind of in the noise. You wouldn't notice it at a show. And then when we look at the jam section, you see this place where it's very stable at the beginning. Even though the song's kind of changing in length, the jam length doesn't really change a lot until around 1993, 94. And you can see, boom, this is where they've decided that they're going to start jamming this song out. And then you see right around the period where you had those speedy rebas, where the composed section was extremely fast, the jam is extremely long. And so at least to me, it kind of supports the idea of an impatient band. It's kind of like, we want to get through this and go to the part that we would prefer to be playing right now. And then in the 3.0 period, you see things kind of settle down where the jam is present. It's not nearly as long as it used to be. And I argue that it's one of the songs where it's a song that's never going to go away, but it's also not the kind of song that you're going to expect to see them just kind of periodically go off the rails. Now, of course, maybe somebody will hear this, and then all of a sudden we're going to get like a 38-minute read, which will be cool. So the last slide about the timing data was to just say, if you look at the ratio of the jam to composed sections, this, I think, kind of supports 3 eras of Reba. You have this era of Reba, where it was the composed section was dominant. You had the mid-90s Reba, where it was primarily a jammy song. And then right now, it's about equal chance. And so it's a song it's entered its stable, mature, adult period. And so this is what you get when you kind of pull apart the timing. And I'd love to do this for other songs, because I think you could do this for Tweezer, you could do it for a handful of others, where you have some predictability in the structure. The only problem is if I'm going to try and find some interesting points in Tweezer, I don't have the convenient 6-minute 15, so that would be a much more laborious process. So if I go and dig into the sound structure, you get some other interesting patterns. And this is what motivated this whole thing for me, is I wanted to basically say, here's a Reba or something that I like, please find something else in my giant pile of music that sounds like this. And so this was also the thing that got me basically all of my followers on Twitter when I first found it, or when I was still using it. So what I'm looking at here is I'm saying, okay, I've got the music, I've got the sound structure. How can I pull some structure out of it? How can I make some sense out of it? And so what I've shown here is these are what are called spectrograms. So this is looking at the spectrum of the song, smooth, spread out over time. And you can see patterns inside of it. So we've got the IT Festival Reba, the Dix 2017 Reba. I labeled where the composed jam transition is. And they look basically the same. Where it's darker, that means it's louder and there's more sound. So you see kind of this boom, build up, quiet, and then the jam starts. You can see the whistling has kind of a similar shape on either side. And you can even see other features, like there's something in the music here and here, where that's part of the composed section, where it's just very regular and always shows up. But then this section here, you can't see anything in there. There's no way you're going to, by eye, see any interesting features from that. So the question I had was, how do I reduce this down to something a little bit simpler, where I can try and reason about similarity? So the metric for doing this is, and this slide took me forever to try and find some way to convey this without an equation. I resisted the urge to put any equations in. But what I'm interested in here is basically saying, if you're looking at this spectrum over time, so I'm seeing how the sound is changing as it's playing, What I'm interested in is saying, how does the sound change in noteworthy ways, where I want to say it's more noteworthy in this change versus another one. So I want to say, because if you look at this spectrum here, changing over time, you'll see there's periods where it's mostly the same, but then occasionally you'll see a spike jump up. And so I would say that spectrally, audio, there's a surprise that occurred there. Something changed in a notable way. And then in the rest of it, it's less surprising to see it changing. And I believe this is 10 seconds from, I think, the id Reba. And so the technique that I based all of this on is this thing called the modified Kullback-Leibler divergence, which is just a statistical method of saying I have two distributions like these things, and I want to see how they have changed that is more surprising. That's the only math term I use here. And if you're curious, those are the citations for the technique. So to illustrate kind of what happens when you compute these things, so these are not Rebas. I wanted to pick 3 songs that I thought had interesting patterns to them that should show up, and I was satisfied that they did show up. I was kind of worried they wouldn't. So the 3 songs I've got here are the IT Festival 46 Days, Chula Vista Tube from '99, and the 2019 Ruby Waves. So the reason these were chosen, I'll talk about the tube first. So if you look at this one, you see at the very beginning of the song, it's kind of the usual tube. The end of the song, that's the return to the usual tube song. And then you have this long, stable pattern inside here. If you've heard this one, Mike, right around here, drops into this very regular groove pattern and sticks on it for a very long time. It's flat, not a lot's happening. You'll see some changes in here, and if you listen to the song, you hear those changes. It's when the groove changes slightly, Trey and Paige maybe do something different. The IT Festival 46 Days, this was chosen because it does go, it's a long one, it does go through multiple sections, but it has these long periods that are, this is my favorite kind of Phish, these long periods of almost noise. Like this period here, it's like, man, what are you doing to your guitar? I hope it's okay. But I love listening to it. And so you see this, and then you see these jumps where that's where that song, when you're listening to it, goes through these very jarring transitions into something that sounds very different. Whereas the Ruby Waves here, it doesn't have those long, drony, weird periods. It's basically many melodic sections that are all very different from each other, and you can see them happening in here. So it's like, cool, this metric seems to be telling me something about the structure of the song that's a little bit easier to interpret than looking at these things. And so I also added this at the last minute because one of the talks on Friday made me think about it, and I was like, this was the subject of the talk on Friday, looking at the SPAC Piper. And so the SPAC Piper, yeah, it's got some interesting sections in it, but the one that I was curious about is the one that someday this will get me a speeding ticket. So the Prague Piper is interesting because the Prague Piper, other than the fact that it accelerates, and this is right around where I get the speeding ticket, it goes kind of through the normal slow build, but then it gets into this period where, other than the pace changing, the musical structure, the melodic structure isn't changing a lot. It's just getting faster and faster and faster. And then you do occasionally see these bursts where it changes a bit, and I did line up where some of these were, and those are some of the places where kind of Machine Gun Trey comes out, and you hear just kind of his little periods where he just blasts off and then comes back. But then it has this really interesting transition at the end, because if you've heard this song, Piper just kind of stops and it goes into this thing that is not a normal Piper ending. It's much slower, much kind of heavier. And so you see that come out in here. And that is very different than the structure of the SPAC Piper. So, back to Reba. And so this is the last part of the talk, is just saying, okay, let's see what happens if I look at all the Rebas and see if I can see anything about its history. So I split it up in 2 different ways. So the first split is I said, okay, I want to split these Rebas into cohorts by date. Largely because when you saw those plots earlier about these, there are noticeable changes over time. So there's kind of the early Rebas, the proto-Rebas, you've got the transition Rebas, you've got the Rebas in the mid-90s, and then you've got everything after the hiatus. So I split that up that way. And then I also said, well, I've got this timing data, so I can also split the audio up and not just look at the song as a whole, but say, what do I learn about the song in the compose section, in the jam section, and just out of curiosity, I was kind of seeing like what happens right around there. Anything interesting? Turns out no, but there's interesting stuff on the other two. So when I look at the song through right before the composed jam transition, the main thing to take away from this is that all of these graphs basically look the same. They all have this same kind of meandering river pattern where I've got all of the songs in this first period show up in here, and I get this pattern that kind of looks like that. Here, similar thing, basically these kind of two bumps and then two little bumps and a bump up. 3.0, same basic structure. And so the composed song, no matter what era you're in, looks relatively the same when I look at the KL divergence over the performance of the song. The one thing to note about all these graphs is you do notice that there's like a spread to them. So even though they're not all following the same line, they're spread apart a little bit. These are all based on taper recordings, which means not only do we have the variability of the band changing, but we also have the variability in the recording. And so you've got different quality microphones, different quality rooms that they're in that change the sound quality, different number of people who can't resist chattering next to the tapers. Don't do that. It's amazing how many of these I'd be listening and it would get quiet and then you hear somebody. So some of the variability here is actually just because of the audience recordings. I think this would look very different if I was to get somebody to give me all the soundboards, which I'd love. So if I move to the next part, and I look at the right before the composed jam transition, so this is the 20 seconds leading up to it, very unsurprising. It's always the same. The one I haven't been able to dig into is I'm kind of curious about a couple of these ones that go a little wild. I did notice when I was manually going through all of this, there were a couple where I made some notes where I think one of them, the note was like, oh, that was gross. Like there are a couple of them where the wheels fell off while they were going through it. Not often. Out of 364, I think I only had a couple where I was like, they messed that one up. And so I think those are some of the ones that contribute to these little guys that go off the edge. If we look afterwards, so coming we're coming from the composed section into that transition point, very flat, very stable. Whereas when we're leaving it, it's flattish, but you can see that as we're going out on the right-hand side of all of these, we begin to diverge. And what's also kind of interesting about it is this section and this section. So this is this is 1990 through 93 and 93 through 96. This is that period where it's kind of that proliferation of jams beginning to start. And so it seems like they're very quick out of the gate to go off into an improvisational section. Whereas when we look in 3.0, that doesn't diverge as much after the composed section ends, which isn't terribly surprising. You listen to a modern Reba, they feel a bit more patient. They hit it and it's kind of a slower build out of it into the jam period. And then the last one is the jams themselves. And this was very unsurprising. There's very little pattern to these. The only thing that's worth noting is the period of, so the 93, 96, that includes that bump where they were in the kind of very long extended jam period. There's no patterns in there. They're all very, very, very different. Whereas when you get into the current one, there's spread in here, but you begin to see some structure. You begin to see that it's not all kind of like a tangled ball of hair. And so I thought that was kind of cool that you see this early on. Yeah, there's not a lot of spread. One of the biggest issues with these is you notice some of them end early. There was a lot of variability in timing. And I did try I ran out of time. I was trying to see if I could have a metric that would let me stretch them out. There's this technique called dynamic time warping. But the tool I used to work, I couldn't write it in time, so I gave up. Turns out I don't do this for my day job. So interesting that when we pull apart the sound, we get to see some of this structure. And it also, the thing that got me all my Twitter followers was the original thing was I had all of these put together. And I kind of regretted that I don't have that graph anymore. But it was really cool because it was basically take these graphs, these graphs, these graphs, these graphs, and line them all up. And it's so cool to look at it with all the Rebas because you see this thing that's like they're all together and then 6 minutes, 15 seconds or so, and then spreads wide apart. So it was kind of cool. The only thing is I got inundated with questions where people were like, that green one, I think I know which one that is. And then I'd have to sit there and go find it. And then, so that's the last of the slides here. The one thing, since I have a couple minutes, the one thing that did not work, that kind of surprised me, there you go. I tried to do BPM detection on this, and it turns out it did not work well at all. And I dug into it a little bit, and it turns out BPM detection is hard, but the detectors often don't detect a single BPM. They usually have multiple that come out, and it turns out that Reba confuses the BPM generators. The only pattern that came out that I thought was worthwhile was that you do see an acceleration at the beginning. The BPM does go up, so the early ones where they're playing slow, stay slow. But the place where they start kind of having those speedy Rebas and the really long jams, that's where the BPM detector does the worst. Like it seems to get the most confused in that period. So this was the disappointing one. I was like, oh, well, that didn't work out. So anyway, that's all the stuff I had to say. Thanks for coming.
Questions? Questions for anybody on the panel? You can open up too.
I just want to say I've seen a lot of Phish data and a lot of presentations, a lot of sources, a couple websites. My mind is still, that was amazing. Thank you.
What's the best Reba?
I'm not answering that. That's like asking who your favorite child is.
Was the decision to not do tagging for the whistling, was that just a time constraint, or was there a different reason that you didn't tag?
No, it was totally a time constraint.
Okay.
I only kind of agreed to do this talk about a month and a half ago, so I was like, okay, I got to do all the research. And
I feel like that would be an interesting, like, which ones whistle and how.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That, I mean, also finding the ending, because there's the whistling, but there's also, it's like another potential composed section that's not always there. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to know that one too, because that's kind of unfair to count that in the jam when it's not really part of the jam. There's also this period when everybody's kind of screaming, yay. That's the audience. I don't care about measuring them. But I may want to know the length of it, because maybe there's something interesting in Rebas where there's a long period where they let people cheer for longer versus one where they don't give them any time and they just go straight in. But that's like the timing for me to go and do all of this tagging here. I think that was about 5 hours of effort. And I'm guessing that this down here is going to be like twice that. Which is fine. I'd sit there in the headphones and not drive other people crazy listening to it, but it's just very time consuming.
Thank you.
If you were at the earlier session, I think Alice would be happy to do it by hand for you.
It might be something that was crowdsourcing. You could see the people to do a bunch of stuff.
That would be interesting. I mean, it would be possible to do. There's a platform actually, not used for music. Has anybody here ever heard of something called Galaxy Zoo? No. So it's basically a thing where astronomers crowdsourced people clicking on the shape of galaxies. And it turns out a lot of people who like looking at stars are quite happy to sit there and look at galaxy images. And so they have a platform that you could use to do this sort of thing, where maybe I could show people spectrograms like this and say, find the whistling. The biggest issue they had is that, and they actually have papers on this, it's kind of like the rating thing. It turns out some people are really terrible about the tagging, but they're very energetic, and they're not doing it maliciously. They're just not good at it. And so one of the issues you have with any crowdsource thing is that you have to figure out how to deal with the noise that's coming from incompetence, malice, that sort of thing. So, or just misunderstanding. Like I may be saying, please find the whistling, And you got some people who will be like, oh, I got to look for that wiggle. But then you're going to have a handful of people who misunderstand the instructions and they all tag this part here. And so how do you deal with that? So crowdsourcing would be a potential thing to do. So plus our community is full of people who, we got a non-trivial number of trolls. So how to keep them out too would be hard.
Just one quick question. Before you tagged, did you bag?
No.
I cannot top that one. Let's thank everybody for an excellent series of talks.